This is lesson 4.2, lesson 3, Principles of the Constitution 5 through 7. So the last video that we had was on principles 1 through 4. So we're going to wrap up the principles and talk about principles 5 through 7 today. So again, your success criteria is I will be able to explain the principles in the Constitution. Okay, let's do a super fast review, okay? So principle. So it's the fundamental truth or foundation of something. So really we're looking at like the foundation of the Constitution. What are the overlying themes or principles that are in the Constitution? Okay, so a quick review of last video. Okay, this is from last video. Popular sovereignty. It means that government is subject to the will of the people. The people are in charge, and that first phrase in the preamble, we the people, signifies that the people are in charge. Republican form of government. We are a republic. Okay, we elect representatives to make decisions for us. Okay, that is a republic. Limited government. We want to limit government and make sure that they can only do so much and only give them specific powers. And then federalism is where the state government and the federal or the national government share power. Okay, they both have some things they can do. This little chart here shows this. Okay, on the left is things that the national government can do. On the right is things that the state government can do. And in the middle, there are some things that both sides can do. Separation of powers. So this is the first new one for today. Okay, this is principle number 5. So it means that we divide powers among different branches of government. They did this because they didn't want one person to get too much power. They did not want to have a king. They had just come from Britain where they had a king, and they don't want that again. So they divide the power so that one person won't have too much. Excuse me. There are 3 branches in our Constitution. And we'll go over this more, but for now, you really just need to know the basics. We have the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Okay, so this kind of shows it. So we have the Constitution, which lays out 3 branches: legislative, executive, judicial, and then who is in charge or who is a part of each branch of government. And again, we'll go over that in more detail in the future. Checks and balances. So this means that each branch of government can check or limit the power of other branches. Okay, so each branch has something, multiple things really, that they can do that will limit the other branches of government. This is just another way to ensure that one person or one group does not get too much power. Okay, so for example, I want to read this. This is Thomas Jefferson. He said, think about, as I read this, how this applies to what I just said about checks and balances. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige or encourage it to control itself. So, what is Thomas Jefferson saying here? Well, what he's saying is, look, if people were perfect, if they were angels, then we wouldn't need a government. Why wouldn't we need a government? Well, because if people are perfect, then they're going to treat everyone with kindness, right? They're not going to do anything wrong. We're not going to have any problems. Everything's going to be great. Then the next part, if angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. So again, if people were perfect, okay, then we wouldn't need to control the government. We wouldn't need to make sure that the government only had so much power, because the people are perfect and they're not going to take more power than they need. Next, in framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty is this. So since we're not angels, okay, we're not perfect, here's the difficulty in forming a government. You must first enable the government to control the governed. So the government has to have enough power to be able to control the people, to not let there be riots or Shays' Rebellion again. Okay, they need to have enough power to do that. And in the next place, encourage it to control itself. So in other words, you want the government to have power, but you don't want the government to have too much power. You want the government to be able to control itself so that it doesn't get too much power. You want a government that is just right. It's like, what's that fairy tale? You guys know. The three, what's that called? The Three Bears? You know, where do they go in and like they get the just right porridge? You guys know what I'm saying. I know you do. So it's like that. They want the just right, not too hot, not too cold, just right government. All right, here's some example of how each branch can check it. Here's the executive branch. One thing that it can do to check the legislative branch is it can veto laws. Okay, it can say, no, Congress, you guys might have passed a law, but I'm going to veto it and say you can't do it. Okay, one way that the legislative branch can check the executive branch is they can impeach and remove a president if they feel like they're abusing their power. One way that the judicial branch can check the executive branch is they can declare things that the president does, executive actions, as unconstitutional. Okay, one way that the judicial branch can check the legislative branch is it can declare acts of Congress or laws unconstitutional. Okay? So there are ways that each of these branches check one another and make sure that the other branches don't have too much power. Last one is individual rights. This means the Constitution guarantees basic freedoms and liberties for everyone. So the first 10 amendments in the Constitution are known as the Bill of Rights, and we're going to talk more about that as we go forward. Okay, here's a couple of scenarios. Which principle does this deal with? In the U.S., we do not vote directly on all laws. Instead, we elect representatives who make laws in our behalf. So what principle would that deal with? What principle is that dealing with? And if you said Republican government or Republican form of government, then you are correct. That is describing a republic. Okay, next one. Early in his term, President Trump made an executive order banning immigrants from 7 Middle Eastern countries from entering the United States. After a few days, this executive order was struck down or overturned by a federal judge in the judicial branch. What what principle does this deal with? And if you said checks and balances, you're correct, because in this case, the judicial branch is checking or limiting the power of the executive branch. The national government can print money and state governments can regulate local schools. So that's describing certain powers by the federal or national government and the state government. What principle does this deal with? If you said federalism, then you are correct. So there is a little bit about the principles 5 through 7 of the Constitution.